this week. A few games of Stein. Good evening, all on Chessbase and livestream Kingscrusher. So I thought we could have a look at some games of Stein this week. So a book I've recently inherited from well, a number of books. One of them was on Stein. It started to fascinate me. His last recorded FIDE rating was 2620. He's got a plus record against Mikhail Tal, and he's beaten a lot of champions, world champions actually. So I thought we could have a look at some of his games. He kind of Kasparov said that Stein went beyond the bounds of the Botvinnik-Smyslov harmony, expanding the limits of our understanding of the game, changing our impressions of the correlation of material and quality of position, of situations with disrupted material and strategic balance, and created the grounds for the emergence of modern ultra-dynamic chess. That's what he said in the Great Predecessors, Volume 3. Okay, so so this game against Krogius, Nicholas Krogius. Actually, I had a book of Nicholas Krogius on chess psychology. It was quite fascinating, and I think some of that book is valid. For me personally, I seem to crack up in a FIDE tournament around 8. I start hallucinating variations. I actually, the variations are just completely wrong sometimes. I think a piece is somewhere else, and I go on that, and I ended up losing tempo, and it's happened twice in a row, I think. 2 years in a row, round 8. I don't know, I think I've had enough by then. And anyway, so the psychology of chess by Krogius was about how blunders occur. So he's interesting in his own right as well. But anyway, he was white against Stein in 1960. So this is Kiev, Ukraine. So d4, and we'll flip the board actually. Okay, so we see actually a King's Engine defense. Okay, being played by Leonid Stein soon. A King's Engine defense, and after castles. So I should first say also that both Bronstein and Stein were highly aggressive players that kind of came from the same school of chess, which was different to Botvinnik. I think that's what Kasparov was referring to. Botvinnik-Smyslov, calm positional. They were very aggressive, dynamic players, and it's no coincidence both Stein and Bronstein, I think, played the King's Engine and other very aggressive stuff. So they really tried to sort of, go for the king a lot in their games and use dynamism and sacrifices. So, so that's a kind of Kiev, school of chess. It's a very aggressive form of chess. Different to Botvinnik-Smyslov. So bishop e2, d6. Okay, so we have a mainline King's Engine. So d5. Okay, which is usually accompanied with bishop g5, annoying pin. But here, actually, bishop g5 is prevented now with h6, which I don't know how many of you would consider h6 here. Do you think that's odd? Anyone thinks that's a bit odd? Bit of prophylaxis, but is it weakening the king's side a little bit? White hasn't castled. Potentially, White could maybe play h3 and bishop e3, and maybe try and castle queen's side, potentially. But I don't know. So after castles, actually castles was played. Now knight h7. So that using that h7 square is another benefit of h6 clearly. So the f pawn is ready to sort of roll forward. Knight e1. Okay. Knight d7. So black is also trying to sometimes secure c5, but sometimes it's not worth playing a5, because usually white's queenside attack will be accelerated when white plays for b4. So that's a bit of a controversial decision to consider a5 sometimes. And he keeps it, I think, in reserve actually, the c5 square. After knight d3, I mean, c5 is going to happen most likely anyway. f5 was played, just getting on with it on the king side. Sorry, Hack Thomas writes on ChessBase server, is it bad for black to give white the move? I think this is some sort of theoretical position. Give white the move. e4, e5 after castles. Oh, sorry. Oh, no. Fischer had this, yeah. It doesn't matter if you castle here. There was a classic Fischer game where opponent played e5 and Fischer played knight e8 and won brilliantly later. He just played d6, c5 and white's centre collapsed. There's a classic Fischer game in that which shows that actually you can omit playing d6. d6 is not mandatory. Yeah. Okay. So let's go on. So e5, d5, h6. So we've got that sort of whole h7 pigeonhole, knight d7, and now so the king side attack is happening against the queen side attack. So b4 is sort of transposing into a kind of, accelerated queen side attack with b4. Okay. Rook f7. This is a classic maneuver. Trying to hold up c7 at the same time. Bishop f8, rook g7. Now, one of the principles here, which is perhaps underestimated if you're not a King's Engine, expert, I think, is the idea of this bishop actually coming here. Assuming this is going to happen, this bishop can sometimes get a very good diagonal on the king like this. That's something to really bear in mind, actually. So it's not just about defending d6 or c7. Sometimes there is an opportunity for that bishop to join in the attack. Okay, so c5 now, knight d f6, which supports like pawn rolling, potentially, like this. c6 now, very quick queenside action it would seem. Maybe a little bit controversial, instead of CD, because it's not really forcibly opening the C file to put pressure on C7. Instead, there's another basis for this, maybe the D5 square. White wants to get D5. So takes, and now Bishop E6 contesting D5 at the moment. B5. And then there's Bishop F8. And as I say, this bishop potentially has got this diagonal, which can be very, very useful. Okay, knight b4, and you see white's strategy revolves around d5 here. So the idea of c6 is, to get a big knight to d5, and then maybe, just try and use the pawns later in the endgame. Maybe it's sort of endgame oriented as well to create a dangerous passed pawn. But now black liberates while he still can by playing actually d5. And he's liberating this bishop, as I say, tactically. He's getting the bishop on the dangerous diagonal now. So, and it's a pawn sack, it seems. It's a pawn sack because after knight takes d5, it's reinforced, clearly, but bishop c5 check, king h1. So we've had here a raw pawn sack against white's strategy. And now the power of this bishop is really emphasized now with this next move, because that forms almost a sort of mating net nearly. After knight h5 there's very dangerous threats. For example, queen h4 and knight g3 would be mate. So things like that are building up. So white wants to make sure black cannot play queen h4 here. So this next move I think is related to that. So queen e1, okay, was played, guarding h4. Now, so a very interesting move here from black anyway. Remember, this bishop's quite powerful here. So what do you think black played here? I hope you're hiding your move score on ChessBase. So if I give you 10 seconds, what do you think black played here? And if you can, hide your move score for future quizzes. Okay, so 10 seconds starting from now if you want to think about this position. What does black play here? Black move from black, Toshin. not a4. That's a move for white. It's black to move here. Okay. Well, I think one of you or two of you guessed it. On knight g3 check. So it's forcibly forcing open a semi-open file actually. So hg, and now queen g5 threatening mate with queen h5. So that clearly has to be stopped. And it seems that black, can't get this through now, because after g4, okay, he hasn't got either h5 or h4 now. But he carries on. It was just another sort of knight sacrifice. So h5. Okay. But the queen is, it seems, a pinning target for this pawn. So actually that pawn is undermined now with g3. And g3 has the benefit that it clears up this second row. So maybe there'll be defensive resources available, one would expect. But hg, king g2. So what has black got for the piece? Rook af8. Building up a bit of pressure on f3. So we know f3, if you can sort of win control of f3, you sort of generally, you can have winning attacks in the King's Engine. We've seen that classic Anand game going down to Nakamura in the King's Engine, and there was a lot of pressure on f3, and it seems, that's not a new thing. F3 pressure is intense here actually as well. So bishop d2. And now let's move queen h6, which of course threatens queen h3 check. But it looks as though this can be parried quite easily with rook h1. And the queen tucks itself, surprisingly, on g7 now. So it's like run away from the king. In fact, it's put itself behind two pawns, and the king's here. So you might ask, what's going on here? What's the queen doing here now? But at least there's no pin now on the queen. So that means f takes g3 is potentially on the cards, with that key f3 pawn being put under intense scrutiny. In fact, it's going to be winning a piece. F takes g and g takes will be winning a piece soon. So white does something about that. G takes f4. Now e takes f4 actually opens up the queen on the diagonal, but that is not significant at the moment. It's adequately protected, that knight. Rook d1 was played, and now the move g5, and it becomes apparent that the queen is also supporting g takes and g4 as a sort of battering the way through to the king, despite these two pawns currently being in the way of the queen. So this looks to be like the plan. e5, this gives white the e4 square, which might be useful for defense, and it will also gain tempo on the bishop. Now this is a pawn sacrifice because the pawn is on, but does black dare take the pawn on e5 here? Well, he did actually. Queen takes e5. And now we have f takes g4, which would seem to run into f3 check, but at the moment f3 is harmless because bishop takes f3 is on the black queen. You can imagine f3 immediately. Bishop takes f3. So say queen takes, and now the bishop's on. So rook, rook takes is probably answered by rook takes e6 here. I hope, without getting mated. Or is black getting mated? Have I miscalculated this? Is white getting mated? Probably white's getting mated here actually. Because check, this probably isn't it. This looks quite dangerous actually for the king. Let's have a look at that again. So, right, let's try and work this out. So f3 check. Whoops! forget you saw that move. Well, f3 check wasn't played. Actually, a spectacular move instead was played, which I've just ruined. Queen takes e2 check was played, which makes way for f3 check. But before we go into that spectacular move played, let's have a quick look at f3 then. Bishop takes f3. Takes. Now maybe there's another move here like knight e7 check. Has anyone got any suggestions about this? Is white winning this? That's the question. Is white winning? If this simple continuation had been played? Anyone? Oh, bishop takes e1. You say bishop takes e1? Rook takes f3. Well, actually, not rook takes e1, so bishop takes e1. But then rook takes f3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Looks good against 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Black would seem to be doing okay here, surely. Unless check? No, there's no check. The other rook. So I was taking with the D rook. Oh, you're saying the other rook. Yes, yes, yes. To give h1 for the king to step back. This is perfectly okay now, isn't it? Rook takes. Yeah? There's no problem here, is there? Peace up. Yeah? Everyone convinced? Cool. So anyway, in the game, a brilliant move was played instead. Well, the king h1 would be the escape square if the right rook's taken. So this move instead, queen takes e2 was played. Okay, so immediately we see if queen takes e2, well, that was the game move actually. But what if knight takes e2? What happens here? Let's have a look. Check, I imagine. So where does the king go? Something goes here. It looks dangerous again. I mean, maybe it just takes here. This starts to look really dangerous. Bishop takes d5. I wonder, there's a lot pointing at the white king now. These bishops, quite good. Rook f3 is a threat, maybe. Is there anything more precise? There's bishop d6 check as well. Or f2. So if the queen moves, check. That looks pretty good. Or even rook f3 check. I mean, this looks pretty bad for white. Yeah. So okay, so basically it was accepted by the queen. Queen takes e2, allowing f3 check. So does black's attack diminish after this? Queen takes f3, rook takes. Okay. Well, black is doing well now. He's only like a pawn down. Loads of pressure. So rook hf1 was played. Bishop takes g4, supporting the rook. Knight e4. Check, winning the exchange. Ouch. Or a whole rook. Nope, the exchange. Okay, so are these pawns dangerous? Check. Takes. White seems to be losing material. Bishop goes back, which covers c8 anyway. as well as rook g2 coming up. a4, rook g2 check. And now the knight is ready to sort of try and come in for the checkmate. Knight f6. There's not enough time for these queenside pawns. Classic. Knight g4. Threatening mate, clearly. Knight e4. And now rook e2 is the end of the game. White resigned here. So that was an energetically played game. If knight g3, I think rook e1 is mating. Okay, so let's have a look in the game in overview and summary. So a very aggressive King's Indian. So not being afraid to slightly weaken the king side as prophylaxis move against bishop g5, but also aggressive as well in its own right. So basically, not waiting even for bishop e3, which puts the bishop over here. Sometimes black waits for bishop e3. No such wait. f4. Okay, because the bishop might be usefully eyeing a7 sometimes. So rook f7. Now getting ready for this kingside attack. So c6, slightly unusual move, perhaps. So white's strategy revolving around d5 now. And it was energetically contested, this strategy, very soon, by bishop f8, preparing a pawn sack. So pawn sack time. And now that the king is running out of escape squares, knight h5, with very dangerous threats indeed. So queen h4, knight g3 needs to be parried. If the queen ever got here and h3, then just bishop takes h3. It's just end of game. So queen e1, check anyway. So piece sacrifice. Basically forcing g4 here. So the interesting thing is, even with two pawns in the row, the queen sneakily comes back. Very sneaky maneuver to be on this diagonal and to be supporting this stuff. Sneaky maneuver by the queen. It was unpinning anyway. And then we see g5. So the queen's coming back in for the attack. And now e5, tempting e5 to get e4 and to try and expose the queen. But now becomes this real shocker, this idea that actually f3 check, there's an even stronger move than f3 check that had to be seen. Maybe he saw this idea that he didn't want these tactical liabilities on the e file. So queen takes e2 is much better from the evidence that we have than simple f3. Would everyone agree with that? Would you have routinely played f3 here, guys? Would you? Instead of queen takes e2? Sometimes brilliant is best. So you got this choice here of f3 check or queen takes e2. What would you have played? So queen takes e2. So the question is, knight takes e2, but we've explored that a bit. So let's run with the game. Basically, the attack kind of raged on, and he didn't mind giving up this bishop. He was getting to the white king now. Check, getting a rook on the 7th. Well, he's a rook up. He's a rook up. And now he's weaving the final mating net. Okay. Alright, so let's go on to another game. Okay. So Gligoric against Stein. Now Gligoric was also a King's Indian, an amazing King's Indian player as well. So these are really famous names that he's playing. So Lvov in 1962. Okay, so 1962. Let's have a look at this. So is this going to be another King's Indian? Yes, another King's Indian, but with an early bishop g5 for sure. So he reacts with c5, not touching the d pawn, just c5 straight away, trying to get control of the dark squares maybe. So d6 now, bishop d3, and now like a Benoni kind of strategy, opening up the center. e6, but white takes on e6, which has the advantage of slightly weakening the king's field, and it makes potentially e5, you know, a bit dangerous on these two pawns. But black has potentially pressure on the f file a little bit. Knight ge2, knight c6, and control of the dark squares. Castles, h6, bishop goes back, and now e5. Now this reminds me of a Kasparov game in this variation, where the opponent had played d takes e6, and Kasparov had played the same, you know, weakening d5 voluntarily to try and later get in b5 and knight d4. I've forgotten the player was white, but it's a system against this. So, you know, black's giving up d5 a little bit, but he's making sure this bishop's not being liberated on this diagonal. So knight d5, knight d4. Jordan says, didn't Anna play d6 a lot as white? Possibly. So the knight was taken here. C takes d4. Again, locking in this bishop. If e takes d4, then you can imagine e5 being strong in the future. f4. Now black takes on d5, opening up the bishop, but bishop f5 challenging it straight away. Queen c2, queen d7. Now f takes d, e5, d takes e5. So these pawns are potentially mobile. They need to be blockaded. But has white got potentially mobile pawns as well? That's the question. Pawn mobility. Blockade straight away with bishop e4. Okay, rook f6. So he's going to like double. Looks pretty logical. Doubles. White doubles as well. h5. So white has mobile pawns that need to be pushed. c5. Interesting move now. Weakness of the last move, c5. It weakens actually b5. And you would have thought, well, this next move still looks a little bit surprising. Queen b5. Doesn't usually play there, but is it tactically doing something on b5? Particularly f1 I'd be concerned of if it's doing anything tactically. In fact, after bishop takes f5, the move g takes f5 is afforded here. I think because, you know, rook takes, I think there'll be queen takes f1 now. Or king takes, check. I think this would be good for black. So queen b5 is functional. Bishop g5. Rook moves back. Rook h3, hitting h5. Queen e8. Actually, the queen is now supporting also the mobile pawns. These pawns are kind of looking mobile. Is this pawn significant? d6. Queen e6. up to queen d1. Now f4. So even offering queen takes h5, which looks scary, but it's defendable. Queen f5 defending h7, and still these pawns, you know, potentially mobile. g4. Queen has to stay on the diagonal. Queen e4. Bishop h4. And then we get this move f3, which would have been a real menace, but the bishop's covering it. Bishop f2. Rook f4. So g4 under fire. Protecting g4. He attacks the rook, provoking g5. A rook exchange. Bishop d8. So what has black achieved here? He's got a dangerous pawn. This pawn might be dangerous. These pawns are not going anywhere at the moment. There's possibility of queen e3 check. That's ruled out now with white's next move, bishop f2. So queen f5 means that the e pawn is potentially mobile, but at the moment, you know, bishop d4 on h8 is unpleasant. King h1. Now the king goes here as though rook h8 is on the cards, but it stopped. Check. King f7. Gets a bit hairy. g6 is a threat. It stopped. King goes back now. What's going on here? b4. So we've got mobile pawns potentially, but these mobile pawns can be pushed. d3, b5, e4. But surely this bishop's controlling e3. Isn't that critical here? White offers the exchange of queens, and that's accepted. So king h7, bishop e3. So one of the pawns is pushed now, f2. Okay, now why was f2? It looks crazy. This pawn is going, isn't it? But no, bishop a5, bishop a5, because d2 is going to be after that. But white has to get on with his pawns, c6. So we've got a battle of mobile pawns. I did lose a game recently when the opponent's central pawns got mobile. It's a common theme strategically, pawn mobility, since Svetozar. The pawns are the soul of chess. So both sides are trying to make their pawns mobile. And in these sort of situations, you sometimes need a fantastic resource to speed up your own pawns and prove the opponent's pawns slower. So there's going to be a fantastic resource coming up soon. Now white has two connected passed pawns after this, which look pretty dangerous as well. Black has dangerous looking pawns. Okay. Bishop b6. Exchanging off the blockader. Bishop takes b6. A takes b6. Now white tries to speed up his pawns now. He's got two connected passed pawns. White sacrifices with rook takes f2. Okay, now black did not take on f2 because look, d7 is pretty quick. Threatening d8. Now if d2, d8 queening and stopping d1, or is it? Check. Yeah. Let's go through that again. Hold on a sec. In the game, he didn't take the rook. So could black take this rook? Interesting. Maybe because of perpetual he didn't take the rook. So in the game he didn't take the rook. He just accelerated his own pawns with e3. Okay. So both sides are offering each other a rook now. Interesting. Rook takes f8 for d2. So these two pawns are crashing through. They're quicker than these two now. Now before we go on, sorry, let's because that was critical, let's just rewind that. Why didn't black take the rook here? Let's just show that again. We were saying, do we want the d pawn or the c pawn? Are we agreed that the d pawn to stop this pawn? This must be the only one to stop, yeah? You do want to play d7 here. There's no other move. Are we agreed on that? Should we agree on that? That d7 is the only move here. Yeah? Any objections? So we'll play d7. So I'll play d2. We must queen. There's no other move. Rook f1 check. So someone was saying perpetual. Can we prove that? Check. Check here. No. Where? Well, maybe because of queen e4, yeah, maybe. Oh, there was queen h5. No, you're just taking, you take. You got the pawn. The pawn's winning. There's no queen h5. So, okay, so we have to assume that black didn't want this position. There's too many checks to calculate. Okay, so we'll go back. So we end up with this double rook sacrifice sequence. So black offers the rook to speed up his pawns. Okay, so d1 check, check, check. And now the queen is guarding c8. He plays e2, king f2, queen e6, again guarding c8 and threatening queen e1. So king e1. The clever trick here now, queen takes d6. So he's threatening now check as well as taking. So white tries to accelerate c8 check by playing rook h8 check, but it's ignored. He doesn't want c8 with check. He moves his king. Rook g8 check and king h5. And here white resigned. He can't allow queen d1. He's got no time. Rook g5, just take it. Sorry, question from Jordan. What if white doesn't take the rook again and plays d7? If white doesn't take the rook again and plays d7, okay, player, what about the refuse of the rook? Sorry, what move number? Refuse which rook? Here? You mean refuse the rook here? If you refuse the rook here, I can just take here. I'm threatening like mate. So you take the rook there. Now c7 was played. Do you agree with c7? Check. 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 e2. Any improvements for white? Can't queen here, can he? Anyone? Oh, we want to go up to queen takes d6. Why is queen d1 a threat? Well, here, if c8, right, check, it's with another check, isn't it? Another check. Isn't white getting finished off here? Check. 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 Interesting. Okay, let's quickly review that game in overview and summary. So another King's Indian game. So with Bishop G5. So this E6 was answered with D takes E6. And this is the same strategy Kasparov used later when I've seen Kasparov play against this system. It's sort of similar to what he did. So Bishop F5. So we've got these potentially mobile pawns. So I've had a game recently where I've been white and I have played F4 and I suffered because of black's central mobile pawns. It seems a common losing theme, actually, in this sort of position, that black's central pawns can be, driven forward. So, especially after the undoubling of pawns, these pawns are still like mobile. And so we get a demonstration of how to use these pawns and offer up, H5 is offered to try and accelerate the pawns. So even potentially scary to allow queen takes H5. But with the pawns mobile, black is so we've got these pawns now here, which seem as though this guy's going to help, but so queen h6 maybe wasn't very good, but I think e3 takes f2 for check was dangerous. So the queens were swapped off, but it didn't help. So two pawn masses and two rook sacrifices by both sides. But black is proving, after queen takes d6, he's winning this race. Okay, so let's have a look at another game. Okay, this is a almost a miniature game. This one. So here was white here against Lajos Portish, Stockholm 1962. So Sicilian. After knight f3, e6. Okay, so opens up the center. a6. Is it the can variation? So bishop d3, black's quite flexible. Knight f6. After castles, queen c7. So actually, eyes h2, knight g4, crude stuff. Interestingly, if this knight goes here, how can it defend like this guy? Maybe that's one reason he played knight d2 here, because now, this sort of stuff, knight f3, is defensive. Maybe that's one reason. Also on c3, it's supporting maybe e5 in the future. Okay. So knight takes c6. Actually, f4 was played now, inviting bishop c5 check. d6. Now knight f3. So this knight here rather than here. That knight's still good there, isn't it? Is it? Little subtlety. Still supporting maybe e5. Okay. e5. Yeah, Bronstein and Stein, I know they share a bit of the name. They both were King's Engine enthusiasts. It was the time when the King's Engine was starting to emerge as a viable weapon of choice. So e5 here. Stein, he takes on e5 and plays knight h4. So that's pretty dangerous, that f5 square. There also might be in some lines, you know, rook f6. If black castles, you know, rook f6 might be on the cards at some point. Actually, it wasn't played here. He just played knight f5. Bishop e6. Queen e2. Okay. Which means maybe bishop c4 is on the cards later. If there was knight h6, just king here, it doesn't have to take for rook f6. a5, bishop c4 is in fact played. King h8. Now bishop g5. Knight moves away. Rook ad1. Now the surprising little thing here is about to happen. Now if you're on ChessBase, please hide the move score. Please can you hide the move score. Click on opening book on the ChessBase server so you don't see the moves coming up. Is that possible to hide the move score? Yeah. Knight b6. So clearly c4 is under fire, is it not? Yeah. So how many of us would just move this bishop, and where do we move it to? So who would usually just move the bishop here? Would anything else factor into consideration? Anything at all? If I give you 10 seconds, what would you say is the best move here for white? So 10 seconds starting from now. Okay. Okay, knight takes g7 was played. Interesting. So black took on c4. Now what does white play? 10 seconds again? So what do you play here? 10 seconds starting from now. What does white play here? Yes, bishop f6, offering the queen. So the thing is, okay, the queen cannot be taken here because if it takes check, knight h6, mate. So black plays bishop e7. And simply, now white plays a supporting move, just moves the queen now, queen f3. So still with this horrible threat of knight f5. And actually, black resigned here. So why did he resign? So let's say takes. What if queen d8? Oh, rook. We got rook takes d8. That isn't a move. What does black play here? So let's say knight d7. We've got rook takes d7. If here we've got knight h5. If here doesn't do much, does it? Nope. Anyone else for defensive resources after queen f3? Anyone? Rook d8 here. Does someone want to play rook d8 here? I think check. Mating. Mating. Blimey. Sorry, okay, pardon me, sorry. Neo says, sorry, what move, Neo? What move? Hang on. What? Can you give me a move number, please? Queen e7. Queen e7. That's a good one. Wow. Is it? Hang on. What about just queen just queen h5? In the other position. Okay. You're wrong. So that was pretty cool. Let's do a quick overview and summary of that game. So that was a neat attacking game. So little finesses in this game to observe against the Can. Maybe a little delicate finesse that instead of knight c3, which might be seen as routine, knight d2 was chosen. So clearly with the idea of f4 and knight f3 later, and using this knight to just exchange off. So now he's getting in this idea that the knight can go to f3 soon, which was actually very important later for the winning maneuver. That was the winning maneuver played in this game. So that's critical that the knight's not over here but on the king side, going for the king. See? Look at that little finesse. Knight d2. Yeah? Who would have thought? This knight. Yeah? Became the goal scorer of the game, didn't it? This knight. Yeah? Okay, after takes. Knight here. Knight f5. And it was given extra tempo with a queen sack pretty soon. So knight takes g7. Amazing knight. This knight on b1. Yeah? Was that amazing or what? Huh? I thought that was pretty cute myself. So, yeah. So after bishop e7, just queen f3. Okay. Let's look at another game. So against Smyslov, this game. So c4. He plays the English opening sometimes. I'm about to give up the English opening. I didn't think it suits my style, but actually, if Stein can play the English opening successfully, Maybe it's not the fault of the English opening, it's just the way I play it. I've got to learn about it somehow to use it as an attacking weapon. So knight f6, knight c3, e6, knight f3, b6, e4. So is e5 a threat to chase this knight, or can it just go back? And then f5 is a bit weak. That's a problem that I've happened to me, that sometimes you play e5 too quickly. Black just retreats the knight and celebrates the use of f5. You've got to be a bit careful here. So after bishop b7, maybe he wasn't that keen to play e5. He just supported the pawn, queen e2. But now he's tempted even further to play e5, which he does do. He plays e5. Okay. So the knight does go back. And so do we have this f5 square? Also, d4 might be a bit weak. You imagine c5, knight c6. Is d4 a bit weak? So there's potential maneuvers here. Okay, d4 straight away, d6. a3, collecting the bishop while the bishop cannot escape backwards because of that pawn. Knight e7. Okay, h4. So it does support, you know, maybe h5, h6 as well as rook h3, maybe a bit of pressure. Knight d7, h5. So white will have the two bishops now after bishop takes f3. Queen takes f3. So bishop pair versus the knight pair. The scene is set. D takes e5. Winning a centre pawn. It's protected. So pawn sack, h6. G takes. Bishop takes h6. So Smyslov is munching white's pawn centre. E takes d4. The bishop comes to recapture that pawn soon. But first rook takes h7. So the bishop is protecting that pawn there. Knight f5. Bishop takes d4. Okay. This queen is tying up the queen at the moment. That's one observation. Maybe g4 is a potential threat. That's another observation. Oh yes, knight takes d4 is not a threat because the queen takes f7. So the bishop is dislodged with c5 in fact. And that is ignored. Actually g4 is played. So after c takes we have g takes. Trying to keep things closed with e5. Queen d5 threatening mate. It's protected. Now c takes d4. Okay. Rook goes to c8. Rook d1. And white seems to have a nice position here. The king just in the centre is horrible. You know, you get mated in the centre. Potential for f6 if the knight's not on it. It's horrible. This bishop can also potentially come out on this diagonal. Queen e7. Actually the bishop goes to g2 now. After rook g8. Surprisingly going into the position now with queen b7 attacking the rook and offering c4, which is taken. Now d takes e5. So it will be a disaster if knight takes. There's like check. Disaster. So check. Queen b5. King gets out of the way of the discovery. King g1. The bishop's pins though. And Smyslov tries to use that with queen c6. It's accepted. Queen takes c6. Rook takes c6. So equal on pawns. And now white wants this rook, but he's pinned. So he plays... I wonder if you can spot what white played here. So you want this rook, but it's pinned. So how would you solve the problem? If I give you 10 seconds, how would you solve the problem? 10 seconds starting from now. What does white play here? Right. Okay. Rook h8. Yes. Now, black plays a crafty move here. He replies with a seemingly cruel tactical move in response. Actually, I wonder if you can guess Smyslov's reply if I give you 10 seconds. It's a surprising move as well. Starting from now. So black to play here. What does black play? More difficult to guess, isn't it? It's more difficult to guess black's move here than white's move. Even though I've said this is quite a clever looking move. He wants to keep the pin. He doesn't want to lose the rook. Can you solve that problem? So black wants to keep the pin on the bishop and not lose the rook. So bishop takes c6. Anyone? I think Jordan's close. Yes. Okay. Jordan had it. Okay. Fantastic game's got it. A few people are getting it. Excellent. Rook cg6. Wow. Okay. So anyway, Stein just takes on g6 after rook takes. He plays bishop c6 anyway, and he's winning a piece. So that's pretty cruel. So he's just won a whole piece. And it's over really. He's a bishop up for just a pawn. Here black resigned. So let's do a quick overview and summary of this game. So he held on to playing e5 until now, and then it sort of became like a French defense winnower, where black, is threatening bishop takes and d takes, it would seem, to win the e-pawn, but white was not bothered about losing the e-pawn at all. He just plunges into the dark squares. So he's fragmented pawns here, and he's going to try and win this, and this bishop comes back on this diagonal. And there's also on queen on f3 is very useful for f7 and a8. So in particular g4 is a very useful move. And so here the queen is still very dangerous, and we get this artificial castling from white pretty soon. So going into g1, very clever tactics now dominate. So rook h8 onto with rook g6, but still white's just winning a piece. He's got time now for bishop c6. Okay, so he's a piece up. That was it. Okay, so let's have a look at another game, shall we? Okay, Stein against Tau. He has got a 3-1 record against Tau with 15 draws, I think, according to some sources. Chessgames.com, I think. So he's got a very good score against Tau. He was white against Tau, so c4. This is Leningrad 1971. Now this is a bit sad. 1971. I think this is close. Close to his death. He died at 38, unfortunately. Stein, a bit tragic, heart attack. I think his last recorded FIDE rating might have been in 1973, actually. But anyway, so knight f6, g3, e6. So bishop g2, d5. White plays knight f3. So it looks like a quiet start. Sort of positional opening. Queen c2. That looks good for supporting e4 later. You know, maybe knight c3 and e4. Okay, b6. Actually, the knight is not moved yet. First rook d1. Now it's moved. Offering c4, actually. I think e4 is going to be interesting. So black keeps solid. b3. Rook c8. So the rook's trying to expose the queen on c2 with later c5. e4 anyway, c5. Takes on d5. Takes on c5. Tal plays d takes c4. And white uses a pawn sack now to shut down the rook, and the c file is shut down. He plays b4. Interesting. So after b takes b5, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Definitely a pawn sack. There's a 2-to-1 against to create a passed pawn. c5 is deprived from black as a square. The c file is deprived. The pawns are not that good. So it's a positional pawn sack. Is this d3 sensitive? A knight cannot come to like d3 at the moment. D file, otherwise knight e5 to d3 might have been good. So queen b6, bishop f4. Rook fd8, a4. So these two pawns are dangerous. You know, a5 on the cards. He blocks a5, which makes actually queen b6 makes queen b6 look strange. He plays queen a5. So why didn't he play queen a5 immediately? Oh dear. Has something gone badly wrong? That seems to be a waste of time. Now knight d2, as though knight takes c4 is on the cards. But the bishop is also attacked, traded off. So bishop takes g2. Not an ordinary recapture on g2 as Wiesenjug. Knight takes c4, attacking the queen anyway. The queen comes to attack the knight. Another Wiesenjug, knight a2, attacking the queen again. Now Tal uses a Wiesenjug. He doesn't move his queen. He plays bishop e4. So in a way we've got a sophisticated queen exchange going on, because now white plays knight takes b4. After bishop c2, knight takes c2. So we've gone a bit into the endgame. We're still okay, what's happened here? 5 pawns against 5 pawns, but there's still 2 against 1 here. The bishop's on b8, so that could be a potential queening square, this b8. So white's still better for the ending. Knight b6. Exchange off rooks. Took with the bishop, not with the rook here. Probably he's concerned knight a5 to c6 or something. The other knight supports the knight on c4. Knight takes, knight takes. So we've still got these 2 pawns ready to sort of rumble. You know, pawn mobility. Key theme. Pawn mobility. Knight d5. Rook d1. So horrible rook to the 7th, which should be decisive in the right hands. I had a beautiful rook coming to the 7th recently. I managed to draw from a 1 position. So it's not all over. You need some precision still. So knight d6. Attacking the rook. Now the pawns go forward. Knight a4. A5 is under fire. Protects it. Okay, and the rook is still coming to d7. Horrible. Knight c3. Or is it? In fact, surprisingly, well, not surprisingly actually, because now, if rook d7, you know, actually the mighty bishop takes a5. He played rook e1, which seems to allow bishop takes a5, but this knight is protecting it. The thing is, actually, there's a menacing threat here of rook e8. And there's a big problem actually with king f8, because bishop d6, and the problem also with f6 is we've got this check, and we've got another check here protecting the rook, so leaving a horrible pin. So actually it seems as though, because in this position b6 looks crushing, so it seems after rook e1 this is very, very dangerous for rook e8. Would you agree with that? That rook e1 actually is very dangerous, more dangerous than rook d7. Agree? So Tell went a piece down actually. He thinks his position's broken. He just gives up the bishop for the 2 pawns. So he's a piece down. So rook e5. Okay. And he doesn't play rook c8 for some reason. He plays knight d4. And after rook takes c5, he resigns. Now, okay, one quick question: what you know, why not rook c8? Anyone? What does it matter? Maybe just bishop e3. Bishop e3. Okay, it's hopeless anyway. So yeah, that was an interesting game. So let's quickly review and summary this game. So English opening with a nice pawn sacrifice, which seemed to nullify Black's c-file pressure. So b4, nice pawn sack, gains pawn mobility, and Zwischenzugs here to get the queens off, leaving white with a lot of pressure still. Nice position for the rook to infiltrate, and a sneaky rook e1 instead of, sorry, not the rook d7 is not on anyway. Sorry, rook e1 is going to be on. Sorry, not at the moment. Rook a8. After a5, the knight's chased. So knight c4, as though rook d7 here, but even stronger it seems. Oh, hang on. The problem with rook d7 here is check, isn't it? Check. So that's probably why rook e1 is more precise. It stops knight e2 check. Sorry, why knight c4, not knight b7? Knight b7. That's a good question, isn't it? Knight b7. I can't see a problem. Does anyone see a problem? Knight b7. It looks good as well. Maybe, you know, maybe that's a good move as well. So knight c4 is also dangerous. Yeah. So anyway, this looks crushing anyway. Rook e1. Looks as though, you know, this bishop's in real trouble. You see, if this bishop ever moves, actually, Then b6, and look at this, b7, and this bishop here. So this knight stops from rook e2. So this is a really crushing threat, b7. Yeah? Okay, so so that's pretty crushing how it was played anyway. Now in this, okay, let's give it a go. So knight b7. What about bishop f6? Smoking Gun, what would you play after bishop f6? Because maybe, you know, now knight c3. Okay. So yeah, knight c4, yeah. Okay, has got some venom as well. It does support b6. Yeah, for b7. Okay. So, okay. Should we just have? Should we call it a day, or should we just have one more? What do you want to do? So there's 9 of you on live stream. There's a few of on ChessBase. If you want, we can. I have got, I think, 1 game extra in reserve in case. Or do you want to go for next week? Okay, a couple of you want one more. Okay, okay. Yeah, people on ChessBase probably messing up the schedule on the server. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. It's not an easy one either. It's a 44 mover. Okay, I've got a 44 mover. I have got an easier choice actually, which is shorter against Petrosian. Actually, should we go for the 26 move game against Petrosian instead? Because we've looked at Petrosian and we think it's more topical for our particular purposes. Because we've looked at Petrosian a bit, the style of Petrosian, prophylaxis. Master of prophylaxis. So how did he break down Petrosian? So he's beaten Smyslov, Tal, Petrosian. He's beaten a few world champions. Yeah. Not to give the game away, Smoking Gun. But you might be onto something there. I don't want to comment. Yeah. So e4. So Petrosian plays the French defense. e6. Okay, d4, d5. We have the winnower, knight c3, bishop b4, e5. Now Petrosian favours knight e7, not c5. So after c5 you usually play a3, but it's played here anyway. a3 takes c5, queen g4, and it looks as though g7 isn't a problem in this line. Surely the whole point of this line is to be able to play knight f5, protecting g7. What is the problem? Bishop d3, and now you can kick the queen, surely, with h5. Queen f4. Okay. Knight c6. So is Petrosian untouchable here in his French defense position? Knight e2. Knight e2. Okay. So that doesn't block the f pawn. Maybe knight g3 is possible. Knight c e7. Seems to be a nice blockade on f5. Knight g3, putting more pressure on f5. Knight g6, kicking the queen to d2. Bishop d7. Rook b1. Using, he's got a semi-open b file, why not use it, I guess. Rook b8. Now white's castles. And Petrosian locks up the position with c4. Okay. Now, actually, you could imagine here, if bishop takes f5, e takes, black might have knight f8, g6, and knight e6. He would use e6. So it's tempting to take on f5, but I think you could get a Petrosian blockade on e6 instead. So actually, he plays bishop e2, just attacking the pawn. Knight takes g3. So which way do you take this knight? So that's a question for you guys. If I give you 10 seconds, what way do you capture the knight? 10 seconds starting from now. You see, the rule we get from people, Tarash might say you always capture towards the centre, right? Do you always capture towards the centre? Do you? In this position, there's a lockdown, isn't there? This bishop might be useful on this diagonal. So it might be the focal point, might be these squares. Actually, he took the f pawn. Okay, so there's pressure. h4. Bishop g4. hg. hg. Doesn't mind the double pawns. They keep the knight out of h4. The knight is kept out of h4. The queen is kept out of h4. Very important. Queen e7. And now a4. Look, the diagonal. Fischer would use this diagonal in the winner. All you need is a few more moves to get a bishop to a3. But it does lose the a pawn. Okay, that's a small price to pay. Bishop takes a4, rook a1. So he's getting a bit more dynamism now after b5, bishop a3. Nice bishop on the diagonal. And now rook f2. He's going to double on f7. Rook b7. Rook af1. Queen d8. Prevents queen g5. So Petrosian's got things under lock and key, hasn't he? f7 and g5 under lock and key. So what does white play here? Which what does white play here which has the potential to increase the pressure of the attack? So this is hard stuff. So I'll give you 10 seconds. Okay, it's not bishop e6. That's a clue. So 10 seconds from now, white to increase the pressure. Okay, 10 seconds starting from now. Anyone? Nope. Not rook f3. Ah, someone has guessed it. Okay. Queen d1. Because you want to be able to play bishop h5, don't you? Take on here and it will rip open the f file to f8. Queen d1. Supports bishop h5. At the moment the rook's got h5. So after rook h6, the bishop comes to kick back the rook. Sorry, I must apologise. It's not just no. Sorry, I've got this wrong. After rook h7, it's not to do with bishop h5 at all. There's another move here which this queen d1 is supporting. Not just supporting h5, it's supporting g4. That's the clue. So what does white play here? Final move of the game. White to play. What does he play here? 10 seconds starting from now. In fact, you might think Petrosian's being ultra clever here, because let's rule out bishop h5. Maybe, just maybe, knight h8. Look, what about that? Wouldn't that defend f7? Dunno. You know, it might defend h. It might be ridiculous, but it defends, doesn't it? No, in this position, what does white play? Yeah, possibly rook h5 as well. The thing is, if you played this, white's still threatening rook takes f7 and queen g6, surely. But actually, in this position, okay, so white's play here. It's not bishop h5. What did white play here? Okay, I'll show you. Okay. Final move of the game. He plays bishop takes e6. Black resigns here. Petrosian resigned. Sorry, bishop takes e6. So let's have a look. So takes, I think it's queen g4. So we're on these two guys. Let's say knight e7. Queen takes, threatening rook f8. Here. Sorry, I'm not sure. Bishop g5. Is this the right way of playing it? I'm not actually sure. There's bishop a3, bishop g5. But what if say queen d7? Yeah. So let's go back. So bishop takes e6. Okay, so takes. Are we assuming, we do assume queen g4 is the right move here, yeah? Are we all agreed on queen g4? Is there something brilliant? I think rook f8 doesn't work. You just take. So we'll go with queen g4, yeah? I assume queen g4. So knight e7. Sorry, queen f3. Queen f3. Alright, let's go with knight e7 again here. I think it's more attractive to win e6, you know. I think I'd go for winning e6. I somehow think this must be winning this position somehow. Rook f8 here. That's a good point. It's winning the queen, isn't it? Yeah. So queen g4, just win the queen with rook f8 check. Yeah. So that's why. Okay. that's a good point. Okay, let's have a quick overview and summary. So the Petrosian was broken down from seemingly solid position. So it took a quiet move or two here, quiet queen retreats. There was a queen retreat first to d2, and then later he took away from the centre and created more dynamic play. And so this killer move, queen d1, is subtle stuff. It's not only supporting bishop h5, but also bishop takes e6. It's two things it seems to be supporting. This queen d1. That's clever, isn't it? So rook h6, the bishop drives the rook back, and now bishop takes e6. Okay. Right. Oh, there's 11 of you on live stream. There's a few of you still on the ChessBase server. I did have one more game, my absolute last game if you did want it, but it's a 44 mover. Now we could leave it till next week if we did Stein again. I don't know, do you want to, I don't know, what do you want to do? Do you want to call it a day now? Or one more game? One more game. Okay. 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 So, okay, one more game. This is the last one. This is the last one. No, this definitely is the last one on my reserve list. Okay. So it was the slightly longer game which I've just skipped over from before. No, we've seen that one, not that one. Pardon me. It's this one. Nope. Cracked up. Stein against Predecessors. Stein against Hartog. Stein against Hartog. Okay. Stein against Hartog. So Amsterdam 1969. Okay. Any of you been to Amsterdam? Yeah? Nice. Okay. So, knight f3. So d5. Lictor, you work there. Yeah, okay. So g3, c6. Yeah. Bishop g2, g6, d3 looks a bit quiet. Opening, coiled spring from white. Okay, so even this can be made into something aggressive. Both sides castle. Now actually accelerating a sort of queenside attack potentially, b4. So as well as giving the bishop a square, b5 might cause structural damage. Knight a6, a3. Knight comes back. Bishop b2. So pressure on e5. d4, closing up, blocking in the bishop for a moment. The pawn chain is undermined with c3. Okay. Bishop g4. Queen c2. Now black tries to keep control of d4 by playing knight e6. So c takes d4. Bishop takes f3. Knight takes f3. So this battle of the d4 square results in lots of exchanges. So white has still, after the smoke has cleared, the two bishops. Maybe potential for f4 and probably f5, because e5, black gets the f5 square. So probably f4, f5 to give black the e5 square if there's a choice of lesser evil. So f4, queen d7, queen c5, putting pressure on d4 actually, and maybe, you know, to stop black from playing b6. The knight is committed to protecting c6 at the moment, so it's evicted anyway straight away. Rook ac8. So the choice here, e5 or f5. f5 is the choice. It threatens to win a piece with f6 as well, bonus. So that has to be stopped. Queen d6. Now rook a e1 is played, which looks as though e5 might be on the card, but at the moment it's protected. g5. Bishop f3. It's going to crawl into this square. Is that useful here? Or is it this diagonal? The King's Engine in reverse. King's Engine in reverse. In the King's Engine defense, this would have been the equivalent bishop coming on that diagonal. So rook e2, b5. Queen goes back. Hitting g5, f6. So black seems to dominate the e5 square. Nice that the bishop's outside the pawn chain. So it seems logical, striking pressure, protecting d4. So it seems nice there. Rook c2, rook c7. Now rook c5 gives the possibility that maybe rook e5 might be on the cards one day. Knight c8. Which might imply, you know, something like this. King g2, knight b6. Bishop d1, stopping maybe knight a4, because there's either check or taking. Knight d7. And now actually check is chosen. The rook retreats. Rook a8, as though a5 might be on the cards. Maybe for a4 or takes, just takes. Queen d1. It looks as though queen h5 carries with it f7 now. Queen e7. Queen d2. These subtle little queen moves. What is this about these little queen moves from this guy? Are you guys a bit shocked by this? The queen delicacy of these games? With queen d2, is h4 on the cards or something? Rook h8, rook fc1. Okay, pressure on c6 again. Knight b8. Now bishop e6. Okay, restricting black a bit. There's options of bishop d7 if knight d7. h5, h4, locking down the king side. g4. Now rook c5 really looks as though this is a possibility. Is it going to be played? Queen d6. Okay. In fact, the exchange sacrifice is played now. Rook takes e5. Okay, now if f takes, then queen g5 looks pretty strong. That'd be like winning this rook. Be crushing. So he has to take with the queen. Then the other rook comes in. And we get a pawn mobility issue as well as king safety issue. Because now e5, and look at this pawn, it's like lost to expand and get into these squares. The queen's getting into these squares. So potentially check. The king actually played king f8. So why not queen takes f6? Anyone? I wonder if bishop takes d4 is on here, or just bishop queen f4, queen f4. Queen f4 threatens the rook as well as bishop takes d4. There's other strong moves as well. So actually the king decided to play king f8, but queen f4 anyway, attacking, you know, this pawn. Knight a6, bishop takes d4. Adequate compensation for the exchange. Look at these bishops, they're fantastic. Look at f7. Maybe even like this, you know. Knight takes c5. Okay, two exchanges down, but so what? Centralizing and powerful attacking move with the queen. Queen e5. So f7 is threatened, getting the rook. The rook moves. Now, final move of the game, a neat little move. I wonder if you can guess it. If I give you 10 seconds, can you guess the final move of the game? Anyone? Final move? Right, actually there might be more than one winning move. The double check was played, bishop d7, so forcing, well, if queen f7, that's mate. And if king takes, then that's mate here anyway. So bishop d7, that's good. That's mating. Okay, so let's have a quick look in overview and summary of this game. So it started off, so it's King's Indian attack system, KIA. But white has the flexibility to kind of play on the queen side. So black is not allowed to get the usual center. There's pressure on the c file. And it looks as though black had a pleasant bishop after g5. His plan to get a nice bishop here and f6 seems like a good plan, but it didn't work out particularly well in this game, because this bishop rerouting was the prelude to an exchange sack on e5, it seems. So there's an exchange sack being prepared for rook takes e5 to be very effective here. Look at the queen's placement. He's very good with his queen and the king. His queen's placement is very relevant to the king, isn't it? To g5. So now e5, it's perfectly located on d2 really for the attack. So check, and this queen f4 looks incredibly powerful as well. Okay, so queen f4. He doesn't care about losing another exchange. He's picking up another center pawn, winning attack. End of game. Okay, great. Hope you enjoyed this week. I'm putting this on YouTube.com Kingscrusher, so it will be on YouTube.com Kingscrusher. Okay, thanks very much. So see you next week. Okay, hope you enjoyed that, got something from it, some attacking ideas maybe. Okay, Happy New Year when it comes. Thanks.